So, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a recap of Daredevil Season 3, Episode 1. Last season it ended with the building exploding, him and Elektra still being inside. So, this opens with him actually, after everything, the entire building collapsed, you see him falling. And, as you know, he's on the ground. It's still dark. And so the morning comes and you really see how fucked up he is. I mean, his face is swollen, like his eyes swollen shut. He just looks... Okay, so he tried to crawl as far as he could, then he collapsed. So just so happens that a cab drove by and saw someone laying on the ground. And he walks over to, to see if the person needed help. And he told him to call Father Latham. I think he said Clinton Church. It was the orphanage. I guess that's where he lived, grew up after his father died. So now he's back at the church and they're scrambling, trying to get him together. One of the nuns want to call the cops. The Father Latham was like, he's the vigilante. If you take him to the hospital, they're going to arrest him. And one of the what's her name, Maggie? I forget the nun's name. And she was like, well, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? And he was like, well, his father is this is Matthew, Jack Murdoch's son. And then all of a sudden everything changed, so she switched gears, and then she got kind of pushed in to help him. I mean, he was just cut up, just a mess. So he's having, some auditory issues, and he's thinking about Elektra, because at this point we haven't seen Elektra, so we don't know what's become of her. And so he's calling out for her, not vocally, but in his mind, you see him having this conversation, and he's reflecting on, their interactions and the whole thing. And then he wakes up, and he's trying to get up, and he's like, well, "Where's Elektra?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know who that is." And then he was having an issue with his ear, saying that he can't hear out his left ear. And he's trying to get up to get out, and then it's like, "Matt, you need to stay in bed." And he ends up falling on the floor, and this whole thing about him he's now having a flashback when he was a kid, when he lost his eyesight. So she tries to help him up, and then he's like, I can't see. And then you hear the voiceover of him when he was a kid, when he lost his eyesight, saying, I can't see. So right now he is just going through it. Okay, so Matt's still laid up, and the father comes in to do communion and hears confessions. And of course, Matt didn't want any parts of that. He just was not in the mood. And so the father could tell. And so he said, "Oh, we could just talk." And so Matt mentioned Elektra, and he was like, "Well, Elektra died months ago. We went to her funeral." And he was like, "I know this sounds crazy, but she was there." And he was like, "Well, he said that the nuns now know who he is, but they've all been sworn to secrecy." And he's like, "Well, I mean, I guess he's like, that part of my life is over. I'm deaf in one ear." And that's what he was having, the auditory issues, almost like, you have a set of headphones and like one go out, but you can kind of still hear that staticky noise. That's basically what he's experiencing. So he's like, "I'm deaf in one ear," and they were just talking, and then the father brought it back around to doing the confessions and communion, and he just turned away, like, I just don't want to be bothered. And so he was like, I guess this is the song, this little dance that we do. I ask you questions and you tell me about God, and I'm just really not in the mood right now. And so the father was like, "Okay, well, I'll be around if you need to talk or whatever." So a little later, some children come in, 2 boys come in, little boys, and they see him, and they was like, "Oh my God, is he alive?" Because he just looks fucked up. So one of the boys tried to go over to touch his toe, and then he kind of woke up. Well, he wouldn't really see, but he could hear him. And he just said "boo," and so they was like, "Oh, who are you and what happened?" Trying to find out, being nosy, what kids do. And so Sister Maggie, I want to say the lady's name is Maggie. If not, I'll correct it later. She walks in and she said, "This room is off limits, and if you're well enough to wander around, you're willing to go to class." So they got on out of there. And he said, "They're afraid of you." And she was like, "Yeah, like you used to be." And she ends up calling him the devil of Hell's Kitchen. She was like, to think that it was one of ours running around town like that. And she was like, just the things that I've heard that you can do. And You are blind, right? And so he was like, you got me. Like all these years I've been faking it. And she was like, that's a fair question. And I mean, it was the same question that Foggy had when he initially found out. So he said, yeah, I'm blind, but my other senses are stronger. And he is blind, technically. I mean, if you've never seen the show, for any of those of you who haven't seen the show, he is blind, but he almost has like a second sight. And it almost like, if you've seen these movies where people wear these night vision goggles, it's kind of blurry, and it's kind of blurry, but that's basically how his kind of second sight works, if that makes any sense. So she made some comment about your dancing days are over, or he was like, well, that part of my life is over. And she was like, your flipping days may be over, but you'll walk again. And she made some comment about how long he would be staying there or something to that effect. And he was like, okay, don't, I'll figure something out. She said, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but this isn't convalescent home. And so she was like, there must be somebody I can call. And he was like, no, nobody. Because of course, at this point, Karen and Foggy thinks he's dead. They think he died in the building. So, okay, so Karen goes to Matt's place to pick up his mail and the whole thing. And so she actually has the key to his apartment. And so she got there, and then she knocked on the door, obviously hoping that he would be there to open the door. But she ended up having to use the key to get in. And, she started having flashbacks of when he initially told her who he was. And I guess later that night she'd gone to his place, and again, somebody questioning, like, you are blind, right? And he tried to explain to her that yes, he is blind, but I tried to explain to her how he can see and how he can read, how he's able to read people and like their body heat and that kind of stuff, and almost like a like sonar or something, like they I guess different colors represent something, different things, different emotions, and so he's able to see that. And saying he can also tell by the person's heartbeat if they're lying to him. And so, she's still trying to wrap her head around everything. And she asked him about the suit, and he showed her where he kept the suit, and he was like, well, that part of my life is over. And she was like, you could just do that? He said, yeah, I just realized that I don't need him anymore. And I don't want to be him anymore. And she just looked at me and was like, I wish I could believe you. But, unlike you, I can't tell when someone's lying to me. And so he walked over to her and put her hand on his chest and was basically like, I'm just, I'm being real with you. I'm being, open and bare with you. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. And then she was like, well, maybe it's not him that's the problem. And so that kind of stung him a little bit. And so then there's a knock at the door, and it's Foggy. Foggy comes in, and he came in. He was like, well, wait a minute, I thought that you were packing the place up. And she was like, surprise. He's like, so what's going on here? So basically she has been keeping his apartment. The landlord is trying to evict him because I guess she missed a month. It has to be more than 1 month because they can't just evict you off 1 month. But she's saying that she missed a month because she's paying 2 rent. She's paying rent on her place and his place, and she needs Foggy to help to convince the landlord that Matt is going to be back. And so they sat down, and he, Foggy was trying to talk some sense into her, like, it's been so much time, and a whole building fell on him, and nobody has seen him since, and he's dead. And then it took him aback because he was like, well, you know what, this is the first time I've ever said that out loud, because they've been friends since college. And he was like, you're a reporter now, so look at the facts. The facts is that. And so she knows logically, like in her rational mind, she knows that he's telling the truth. But still, she was like, I don't feel like he's dead. And so Foggy agreed that he would help her with 1 month's rent and 1 more month. and kind of get caught up on some of Matt's bills. They were splitting them down in the middle. So I was actually expecting them to turn around and him be standing there, but that's not what happened. So we'll see. Okay, so they found a space for him. It looks like in the basement of this church. I mean, it's a sink. They got a bed. I mean, they kind of fixed it up a little bit for him so he can have some comfort, I guess. And so you can see that, you know, he could hear some singing, and he's like, "What is that Arabic?" And he was like, "Oh, well, the pastor, father was telling him that they were sharing the space, you know, something to that effect." But Sister Maggie, I'm gonna keep calling the lady Maggie until I verify her name. But she told the father was like, well, you know, if you want to talk. He was like, no thanks. So he's still trying to do the communion and the confessions. And he's like, no thanks. So the sister was like, I'll take it from here. So she pushed him over to the bed. It was like, you have a bed here, and then there was some button that they set up, and so she was like, you can push that and we'll hear it upstairs because we have nothing better to do. I'm like, it's just the attitude. Okay. And so he said, oh, that was very Christian. And she was like sarcastic and called him a few other things. Maybe you're right. Maybe you don't have any friends. Like, she's really nasty to him. I'm like, what? But and so they started talking, and he started talking about Job and how Job was God's most loyal servant. And he would sacrifice 10 goats for each of his children, and in the end, he ends up killing all the kids and scorching his land, and you know, and that's what God did to his most loyal servant. And he was basically making a comparison to him, like, I too thought that I was a soldier for God, and that I was basically doing God's work by cleaning up my community, the whole thing. And basically, he was like, I realized that it was all for nothing. And she took off her crucifix and gave it to him, and he threw it on the bed and was like, you weren't listening. And she said, I was listening. You might think God hates you right now. And he's like, I don't think God hates me right now. Or he said, you may hate God. He was like, I don't hate God right now. I just see him for who he really is. And he said, now I finally realized that for all that Job did, I just feel like Job was a pussy, and that's who I was. And I just really came to the realization that I would rather die as the devil than live as Matt Murdock. And he was like, you know, I did have friends. I did have people that I cared about, and I'm choosing to let them believe that I'm gone, because the truth is I am. So it was a really sad moment, but like, she's just, oh, Matt. Okay, so another thing you see is somebody preparing preparing a meal, and so you see them chopping up I don't know if that was a cilantro or whatever that was, and making them an omelet and the whole thing, and the table is all nicely set, and then it comes to reality. It's Fisk in prison in his cell. He got him a hot plate and got a little plate set up with his little plain omelet, and you know, all this he's in prison, so it's like all this loud talking and screaming and all stuff is going on the outside, and he was just basically like, shut up. And they got quiet. It got so quiet you could hear a pin drop almost. It's like, and he got that much bull? Okay. And so his attorneys walk in, and he's like, okay, so what's going on? And he was like, well, there's talks about your appeal is going good, but Marianne, who's the woman he was dating, she had left the country. And he was like, she's not going to be able to come back into the country, because if she does, then they're going to prosecute her as an accessory. So it's safer for her to stay where she is. And he's sitting there looking like old boy from, I don't know if you remember him from Full Metal Jacket, when he snapped the hell out. He was sitting in the bathroom and snapped the hell out and ended up shooting his drill sergeant. That's about how he's looking right about now. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, pull up that photo of him in that movie, and yeah. Okay, so did Sister Maggie just make me like her? Like, what? Okay, so he's stumbling around in the middle of the night, and he decides to walk without his cane. And of course his hearing is still jacked up, and he keeps saying that he can't smell anything. And everything that he tastes like ash or something. His senses are just all screwed up. So he's walking in the middle of the night, and of course he runs into walks into something and falls over. And so she comes in, and she basically tells him, gives him the business, like, you know, she admitted, like, I think that you're a hero, and here you are in this orphanage with children who have far less than you, and who are far worse than you ever were, and you're just down here hiding out, giving up. And of course he was like, well, you know what, you don't really know me, and you don't know what you're talking about. She was like, I've been a nun for 30 years. I know self-pity when I hear it. He said, oh, well, okay, well, you know, bully for you, well, good, you know, good for you. And then he walks away, and she was like, you know, I remember your father, and I used to watch some of his fights, and I saw him go down many times, but he never stayed down. And she walked away and just left him standing there feeling all sorry with his pitiful self. I mean, I get that it's a tough time. Like, your friend, the lecturer who was also his lover, and you know, you still don't know what happened to her. You're worried about your friends. You just don't. I get you got a lot going on. But I think it's fucked up that he's just like, the hell with Karen and Foggy and all the other people that cared about me. I'm just gonna hide out down here until whenever, and then I'm just gonna make some miraculous, some grand entrance, or what do you like? Just like at this point, I was like, what the hell are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, Matt? Get off your ass and do something. So she was right. Okay, so Sister Maggie, you all right with me? Okay, so Stella getting her groove back, I guess. So he got up the next morning, and he kept complaining about him not being able to smell anything. I can't smell anything. I can't smell anything. And so he used this, what do they call them? Neti pots? I forget what they call them when you rinse it almost looks like a small teapot, and you kind of rinse your nose out. And he did that, and the hugest freaking blood clot came out of his nose. It was like, blood was coming out of his nose, his mouth. It was just so disgusting. And you could tell after, it was like almost like his sinuses and all that area was clear, that things started to come back to him. Like, he touched the mirror, and then he could hear a train, as he's saying it's the train that runs under the orphanage, something, I don't know. And then he touched the sink, he touched the floor, and so things are starting to come back to him. So now he starts training, starts working out to get back in shape. And so for whatever reason, he decides he wants to spar. And of course, so Father Latham, he went and got a guy who they could trust and brought him down, and they had a little match. And he gave as good as he gave as good as he got. And afterwards, Maggie was like, I'm proud of you. And, how amazing he was. And so, the tough love thing, really worked. And so she gave him the crucifix again. And this time he took it. And she was like, she put it on him. And he was like, she said, did your hair spin around? Okay, so just wear it from me. So he kept it on. And then she asked if he would join her for mass. So he said, I'll think about it, or maybe whatever. And so while he was sitting there, he decided, okay, he decided to leave the church. And so he went through the lost and found some rags to kind of cover his face. And he kind of went on top of the building, and so he could hear things that are going on. And so it was this lady who started screaming that she was being mugged or whatever was going on. And so he decided he was going to intervene. And again, he gave as good as he got, but in the end, he's still not there yet. So he almost died. So just as the person was about to strike him with a bat, the police started. They heard police sirens and they ran off. So basically, that was the only thing that really saved him. But he still had enough sense and still had enough strength to get away. So by the time the police came, he was long gone. So it wasn't like he was caught or anything like that. So he's starting to feel more like himself, but I think at this point he's rushing it. And I mean, he was always getting hurt, but right now he's still weak, and And he just needs to pace himself before they really do picking out some flowers. Before his toes be too pointed to the sky and they crying over his coffin. So he just needs to take some time and let his body finish healing. Okay, so Ray Nadine, Nader, Ray, I think it's Ray Nadine. Enters the picture. Okay, so they flash to him. It's his son's birthday party. And everybody's outside playing, and he and his wife are in the kitchen, and he asked her if she had bought something, and she said, well, I tried to, but the card declined. He said, did you use direct? So he's asking her what type of card that she used, and she was like, yes. And so they're having financial issues. And the reason they're having financial issues is because his sister-in-law, she was diagnosed with cancer, and so they were helping them out financially so that they until they can get through it. So they put them in kind of a hole. It's not even kind, they put them in a hole. And so he went to work the next day and went into a supervisor's office and basically asked her, so my performance review was up next month, right? And she was like, yes. So I would like to move it up, because usually when they do the review, they tell you, if you're going to raise and the percentage and the whole, that whole kind of thing. And she was like, these are not, a review is not something that we could just shuffle around. And so he basically said that you're personally, like the supervisor personally, you're holding me back. And I would like to know why. And basically, if I don't get a satisfactory answer, I'm filing a complaint with the EEO. And she had to break it down to him. You're right. I am holding you back, but it's to protect you. And he was like, protect me? What are you talking about, protect me? He works for, if I didn't say, he works for the FBI. When you're in these jobs, well, you got to have these high security clearances, or basically any level of security clearance. They do a background check. Most jobs nowadays do a background check and do a credit check to see if you're subject to be, I guess, flipped. Like, if you're in dire financial strait and you have a certain level of security access to information or whatever, then the fear is that you're going to leverage that in order for money. And so they do, a lot of companies doing that, especially if you're like an FBI agent, that kind of stuff. And so she said the reason I'm protecting you is because your FICO score is 500 or something, 575 or something. He said, okay. She's like 575. And he said, yeah, and you know why that is. My sister-in-law, and she was like, I understand that, but the way you are situated financially makes you vulnerable. Makes you a liability. And you're never going to get approved at this point to be promoted, which is going to probably give him more clearance to more things. And she's like, at this point, your only goal is to basically get your financial affairs in order. And so now Ray is caught between a rock and a hard place. So she's like, oh, well, I have a case for you. And so she gives him the case. And he was like, why would I go up there also he could tell us a bunch of nothing again? Like, why am I wasting my time? So he goes up to the prison and he sits there, and we're waiting for the person that he's referring to. And of course, it's Fisk. And Ray just sat there, was like, why don't you just tell me to eat shit and die or something, so we can stop wasting each other's time. Like, we don't even need to go through this whole popping circumstance. And so Fisk sat there and he looked at him. He said, have you ever loved somebody so much that you would do anything to protect them? And Ray kind of looked at him like, are you threatening me? Basically, he just said, are you threatening me? And Fisk was like, I've done a lot of bad things in my life, and I am willing to accept the punishment of being here for those things. But what I cannot tolerate is the woman I love also being punished for. And so Ray sat across from me. She was like, looking at him like, so what exactly are you saying? And Fisk was like, I want to make a deal. Now remember, Fisk is a big guy, so he knows the who's who, everybody's shit. So I'm like, what kind of deal is he about to make? And so that's basically where the episode ends. So it's like, Fisk got something up his sleeves. He ain't about to give no damn body up, because his ass would be dead as a fucking Dead as a doornail. Like, okay, these people, I'm just assuming I'm not in the criminal, I'm not a criminal, and I'm not in that lifestyle, but I've read enough and I've seen enough movies to know that they frown upon rats. So, I mean, I don't, Fisk ain't about to give nothing up. Nothing substantial anyway. And if he does, sure, this is going to be to his benefit, and his ass is going to be up out of prison. So, this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. So, I'm going to end this here, and I'll talk to you guys in the next episode.